You know, it's a skill that unlocks entire worlds for us. But here's the thing that's kind of wild. It doesn't come naturally. Not at all. I mean, unlike walking or talking, our brains aren't born with some kind of built-in read button. So how in the world do we teach this incredibly complex skill to an organ that wasn't even designed for it? Let's dive into the neuroscience behind this amazing feat.
Right? This is the core question, isn't it? Think about it. Most kids, they just pick up spoken language. They listen, they imitate, and boom, they're talking. But learning to read, that's a whole different ballgame. It often takes years of really conscious effort and instruction. So what gives? What explains this huge difference?
And this isn't some tiny niche problem. The research we're looking at shows that a pretty staggering 20 to 35% of students have a really tough time learning to read. I mean, that's anywhere from a fifth to over a third of the kids in any given classroom. That makes it absolutely critical that we understand how the brain actually learns this skill.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to take a journey right inside the reading brain. First, we'll get into why reading feels so unnatural. Then we'll actually map out the specific brain systems that make it all happen. After that, we'll see how we crack the written code, watch the brain build these incredible shortcuts, and finally, see how it all comes together for that sweet, effortless fluency. Okay, first up, why is this so unnatural? Well, the simple truth is our brains evolved over millennia with regions specifically dedicated to understanding and producing spoken language. But for reading, there's no pre-installed software, no dedicated reading part. It's a human invention, and we basically have to build the capability from scratch. And when you put them side by side, the contrast is just, wow. Spoken language is a natural part of our development. Written language, on the other hand, is an artificial invention. It has to be explicitly taught, forcing all these different parts of our brain, areas that were originally designed for stuff like vision and sound, to connect and cooperate in a totally new way. So if our brains have to build this whole new network, what does that actually look like? This brings us to mapping the reading brain. And what's fascinating is that there isn't one single reading center. Instead, the brain builds this powerful, interconnected network by recruiting a team of 3 different systems. And this is a really big deal. Reading isn't the job of one lonely part of the brain. Nope. It's a highly coordinated team effort, a neural network that we literally build and strengthen through practice. So who are the players on this all-star team? Well, you've got the frontal system. Think of it as the analyst, figuring out meaning. Then there's the ventral posterior system, our super fast word recognizer that spots familiar words in a flash. And finally, the dorsal posterior system, the crucial sound symbol linker, which does all the heavy lifting for new readers. Let's break that down a bit more. The frontal system, right up at the front of your brain, handles all the deep analysis and comprehension. The ventral posterior system, back near our visual centers, becomes like a rapid-fire word recognizer. And that dorsal posterior system, it's doing the slow, careful work of sounding out, linking letters to sounds. That's why early readers rely so heavily on that dorsal system, while fluent readers have trained their ventral system to be lightning fast. Now, that whole process of linking letters to sounds, that's the first major hurdle. And it brings us to our third section, cracking the written code. This is all about teaching the brain how to turn those abstract little squiggles on a page into the meaningful sounds of language. And the absolute key to cracking that code is something called phonemic awareness. Before a kid can even think about connecting a letter to a sound, their brain first has to be able to hear and identify that individual sound, that phoneme, inside a spoken word. It's the ability to hear the k sound in cat. So a brain that has phonemic awareness can take a simple spoken word like run and mentally break it apart into its 3 distinct sounds, n. You see? Without that critical ability, the letters of the alphabet are just meaningless shapes. This quote from Dr. Judy Willis just hits the nail on the head. Reading forces us to consciously get that our written language is a code. The letters aren't random. They are intentionally mapped to the sounds of our speech. And learning to read is really just learning the rules of that code. So, once we start cracking the code, the brain does what it does best. It looks for shortcuts. And this leads us to the power of patterning. This is where reading starts to get a whole lot faster and way more efficient.
See, our brain is a master pattern detection machine. Instead of painstakingly sounding out every single letter of every word, it starts to recognize common chunks, like the 8 pattern you see in these words. Your brain doesn't have to decode ATE every single time. It just recognizes the whole cluster as one unit, and that dramatically speeds up everything.
So how does this happen? It's a simple but really powerful process. First, the brain spots a new pattern. Then, through practice, seeing that same pattern over and over again in new words, it physically builds and strengthens the neural pathways for recognizing it. This makes the connection stronger, faster, and way more automatic the next time. This whole process has a name: brain plasticity. It's the brain's incredible ability to literally rewire itself based on experience. So every single time a child practices reading, they are physically building new connections, creating a faster, more efficient reading circuit. The brain isn't fixed. It's actively shaped by the very act of learning. It's amazing. All right, so all of this hard work, all of this rewiring, it's all leading to the ultimate goal: achieving effortless fluency. This is the magic moment where decoding and patterning becomes so automatic that the brain is finally freed up to focus not just on what the words are, but on what they mean. Think of it like this. For a word-by-word reader, all their mental energy, their entire focus is on the mechanics of just decoding. It leaves very little brain power for actual comprehension. But for a fluent reader, the focus has totally shifted to meaning. Word recognition is so fast and automatic that their brain is free to think, to visualize, and to truly understand the story. So how do we get there? Well, the great news is that research points to really concrete strategies that build these fluent neural circuits. Things like listening to a skilled reader, which is modeled reading, repeatedly reading the same text to build that automaticity, practicing with a partner. All of these things help strengthen those essential brain pathways. So, if we put it all together, you can think of it like building a highway system in the brain. Basic decoding is like paving individual local roads, one letter at a time. It's slow. Patterning starts to connect those roads into a city grid, which is better. But fluency, that's achieving superhighway speeds, where information flows so quickly and smoothly it feels completely effortless. And you know, when you step back, understanding the neuroscience of reading doesn't just help us teach reading better. It opens up a much bigger and way more exciting question. If we can actually map the process of building a reading brain, what other fundamental parts of learning and education are we now ready to understand and maybe even rewire from the ground up?